Since I was a small child, the paranormal has been a persistent presence in my life. It's as if I exist in a realm that straddles the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual, where the supernatural is as much a part of my reality as the everyday moments that fill my days. The first indications of this came through my dreams. Even from a young age, I would occasionally have visions of the future, fleeting glimpses of events that would later come to pass. These premonitory dreams would often foretell the deaths of friends and family members, filling me with a profound sense of grief and powerlessness. Knowing the pain of loss before it happens is a burden no child should have to bear. Alongside these disturbing premonitions, I also suffered from frequent episodes of sleep paralysis. I would wake in the dead of night, my body frozen and unresponsive, as sinister entities hovered over me. They would torment me, pressing down on my chest, shaking me violently, or whispering nightmarish things in my ear. These terrifying experiences became a regular occurrence, something I learned to dread but also in a twisted way to expect. Yet the most unsettling part was when these supernatural forces began to manifest in the waking world. I would see their grotesque, inhuman forms roaming the halls of my own home. Tall, gangly creatures with features that defied description. I would try my best to ignore their presence, keeping my head down and my eyes averted, but their overwhelming aura was suffocating. Whenever these unsettling encounters happened, I would rush to my parents, desperate for comfort and reassurance. But they never believed me. No matter how vividly I described what I had seen or experienced, they would dismiss it as the product of an overactive imagination. It was just a dream, they would insist, trying to convince me that the horrors I faced were not real. This lack of support only compounded my anguish. I felt utterly alone, trapped in a world where I was the only one who could see the darkness that lurked all around me. The burden became almost too much to bear. Then, one night, everything changed. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning when I jolted awake, the sensation of someone else's presence in my room overwhelming me. I could feel the mattress dipping as the unseen entity climbed onto the bed, surrounding me. I was paralyzed, unable to move or speak, only able to lie there in pure terror as this dark force made its presence known. After what felt like an eternity, I finally regained control of my body and immediately ran to my parents' room. But even as I pleaded with them to believe me, they stubbornly insisted that it had all been just a dream. However, that same night, as my mother was preparing dinner, we heard the voice of a young girl calling her name. The sound seemed to be coming from the back of the property, and the child kept repeating my mother's name, as if beckoning her. Terrified, my mother grabbed my arm, and we fled the house, sitting on the curb for over an hour until my father returned from work. When he arrived, my mother refused to go back inside, begging him to believe me this time. "We have to believe her," she cried. "There's a child calling me, and we have to do something." That night, I slept in my parents' room, and the next morning, we went to the first Mass of the day. But from the moment I stepped into the church, I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of unease. Something within me was urging me to leave, to not stay. I had an overpowering desire to just run out of there, but I couldn't understand why. After the service, my parents approached the priest and recounted the events that had been plaguing me. Without hesitation, the priest led us to a secluded room, a small chamber with wooden floors and doors. He then proceeded to restrain me in a chair, securing my entire body with straps so that I couldn't move. Soon, more people began to arrive, including a man in strange attire, who I now believe was a bishop. In his hands, he carried an ancient, heavy tome, not a Bible, but something else entirely. They all placed their right hands upon me, and as they began to pray, their voices chanting in a language I didn't understand, I suddenly lost control. My laughter became distorted and guttural, my voice deepening and changing. I opened my eyes, and through the haze I saw my parents weeping, terror etched on their faces at the sight of me. I was drenched in my own sweat, and when I finally regained my senses, they doused me with holy water, the icy liquid sending shivers through my body. Together, they removed the restraints, and I was finally able to stand, my limbs weak and shaky. Before we left, the priest issued a grave warning. I was a being of great light, he said, and unfortunately, I would always be in contact with the paranormal. My energy, he explained, attracted these dark entities and made me particularly vulnerable to them. The only protection, he advised, was to pray constantly and try to ignore these forces of darkness. As we departed, the priest pulled a wooden rosary from his pocket, its beads carved with my initials. He instructed me to hang it on the door of my bedroom and to never sleep without it. And that is precisely what I have done ever since. The rosary has become my constant companion, a talisman against the unseen terrors that have plagued me my entire life. With it, I have been able to find some respite, some semblance of peace in my slumber. But the encounters have not stopped. The paranormal has remained a persistent, inescapable part of my existence. And I continue to share my experiences in the hopes that by giving voice to these unsettling truths, I might find solace, or perhaps even help others who have been thrust into a similarly unnerving reality. It's been years since my boyfriend Jack's first wife passed away, and the grief he endured was a heavy burden to witness. When we first started dating, I knew their relationship had been one of deep love and connection, and I always respected the bond they had shared. Even though I had never met her, I could sense the profound impact her loss had on him. Jack had been completely devastated after his wife's sudden death. For a long time, he retreated into himself, unable to even consider the possibility of finding love again. It took him years to slowly emerge from that dark period, to rediscover his zest for life and open his heart to the idea of a new relationship. When we met, I could see the scars of his past still etched on his soul. But there was also a glimmer of hope, a willingness to take a chance and allow himself to feel again. Our connection was tentative at first, both of us cautious and uncertain. But over time, as we got to know each other, that connection deepened into something truly special. Now, after nearly a year together, we've grown incredibly close. In fact, we've even started discussing marriage and the possibility of starting a family together. It's a big step, and one I don't take lightly, given the history Jack carries with him. But I've fallen deeply in love, and I know he feels the same way about me. Despite my own personal experiences with the paranormal, I've never considered myself to be particularly susceptible to supernatural occurrences. I've never seen a ghost or had any unexplained encounters, but that all changed one night when I had a dream that would leave an indelible mark on me. In the dream, Jack, his late wife, and I were all seated around a table as if we were having dinner together. Jack spoke to me with such tenderness and affection, telling me that he loved me. He also addressed his ex-wife, but the way he interacted with her was markedly different. He treated her more like a dear friend than a former partner. As for his wife, she appeared sad, almost wistful as she watched the two of us. There was a clear sense of melancholy about her, a bittersweet acceptance of the changes that had come to pass. At one point, the three of us were left alone, and she turned to me, speaking of the pain she felt in seeing the man she loved so deeply now sharing his life with another woman. However, she also expressed happiness that Jack had found a way to move forward and rebuild his life. She told me that she wished us well, that she wanted us to work hard at our relationship and embrace the happiness that was in store for us. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone, the dream dissolving around me. When I woke up, I was deeply shaken. The vividness of the experience, the clarity of her words, the emotions I had felt, it all felt so real, so profoundly tangible. I lay there, tears streaming down my face, grappling with the weight of what I had just witnessed. For several days, I found myself unable to muster the courage to tell Jack about the dream. I was worried that he might not believe me, or that he might interpret it as me somehow exploiting the memory of his late wife for my own benefit. Their relationship had been so sacred, so deeply personal, and I didn't want to intrude on that in any way. But eventually, the need to share this experience became too overwhelming. I knew I had to tell him, to unburden myself of this profound encounter. So, one day, I finally confided in him, recounting the dream in its entirety. As I spoke, I could see the pain etching itself across his features. I could tell that my words were dredging up emotions he had long tried to suppress. But to my relief, he listened intently, without interruption. And when I finished, he simply pulled me into a tight embrace, his own tears mingling with mine. In my family, he said. "We have a belief that the dead can communicate with the living through dreams. She was here to give us her blessing." His words struck a chord deep within me, and suddenly, the significance of the dream became clear. This was not just a figment of my imagination, but a genuine supernatural occurrence. A visitation from the other side. A final message from a woman who had loved her husband so deeply that she wanted to ensure his happiness, even after her own passing. The realization left me both awed and deeply saddened. I couldn't help but feel for this woman, this ghost who had been unable to find peace, who had been compelled to reach out from beyond the veil to ensure the well-being of the man she had loved. The thought of her watching Jack's anguish, unable to comfort him, was almost more than I could bear. A week later, we visited Jack's father, a man known for his wisdom and spirituality. I seized the opportunity to share the dream with him, curious to hear his perspective. After listening intently, he nodded thoughtfully. "The dead cannot rest when they leave unfinished business behind," he explained. In this case, she could not find peace because she had seen the immense pain her husband went through after her death. She was entrusting you to take care of him now, as she had done during her lifetime. Tears welled up in my eyes as I grasped the full weight of his words. I had never imagined that I would one day be speaking to the dead, let alone receiving a blessing from a woman I had never even met. It was a humbling and profound experience, one that left me with a deep sense of responsibility and a renewed appreciation for the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of this physical world. A month after that dream, I discovered that I was pregnant. I still haven't shared this news with anyone, not even with Jack. Part of me wonders if his late wife knew, if that was part of the reason she sought me out in my dream, to ensure that her beloved's future was secured, that he would have the family he had once longed for. I don't know what lies in store for us or what challenges we may face, but I take comfort in the knowledge that Jack's first wife, wherever she may be, is watching over us, and that she has given us her blessing to build a life together. It's a weight I'm honored to bear, a responsibility I will carry with the utmost care and reverence. My father, a schoolteacher by profession, had always struggled to make ends meet for our family. So, a few years ago, he decided to try his hand at driving a taxi at night to supplement his income. One early morning, he arrived home visibly shaken and pale, waking my mother to recount his harrowing experience. After catching his breath, he shared the details with us. It had been late at night, and my father was on his way back home, driving along the road to Santa Rosa in Apodaca, Nuevo León. Suddenly, he noticed an elderly couple, a man and a woman, walking by the side of the road. Being the kind-hearted person he is, my father immediately pulled over to offer them a ride, even though they didn't have any money. The old man got into the front seat next to my father, while the woman climbed into the back seat. As they began to drive, the man asked my father a curious question. "Aren't you afraid of the people who aren't of this world?" My father, with a nervous laugh, responded that he was more afraid of the living than the dead. The man then warned him, "Be very careful, because around here, a woman without feet is known to appear." Feeling increasingly uneasy, my father simply focused on the road, asking the couple where they wanted to be dropped off. They asked to be let out at the Santa Rosa Cemetery, and as they exited the taxi, my father turned to make sure the woman was getting out safely. But to his shock, she had vanished. He looked around, but there was no sign of her. Confused and unsettled, my father quickly drove away, his heart pounding. When he arrived home, he was pale and visibly shaken. After recounting the incident to my mother, he tried to put it out of his mind and get some sleep. But the next morning, he felt compelled to share his experience with the local priest, hoping to find some explanation or reassurance. The priest listened intently and simply advised my father to be very cautious, especially when driving at those late hours. Beyond that, the priest offered no further insight, leaving my father to grapple with the unsettling encounter on his own. About 2 months later, my father had a similar experience while working as a taxi driver. This time, he was driving along the same stretch of road when a large truck began flashing its lights at him repeatedly, as if trying to get his attention. My father pulled over, and the truck driver asked if he could please take a woman and her daughter home, as his route had ended, and he couldn't continue. Agreeing to help, my father allowed the woman and her daughter to get into his taxi. As they drove, the woman instructed him to turn onto a dirt road, telling him to go about 3 kilometers to reach their ranch. My father expressed his concerns, explaining that the rough, unpaved road might be too much for his taxi, and he didn't want to risk getting a flat tire. But the woman insisted, saying she couldn't make the walk with her daughter. Reluctantly, my father proceeded down the treacherous dirt road. As they drove, the woman warned him about the same ghostly figure he had encountered before, the woman without feet. She told him that if he saw her, he should not look at her or stop the car. My father, remembering his previous experience, assured the woman that he would be cautious. When they reached the ranch, it appeared to be well kept, with lights on and animals visible. The woman and her daughter thanked my father and paid the fare. As he turned to leave, my father couldn't help but glance back, hoping to catch a glimpse of the property. But to his surprise, the ranch was now completely dark and deserted, as if it had been abandoned for years. Feeling uneasy, my father hastily made his way back to the main road. But as he neared the point where he had encountered the ghostly woman before, there she was, standing in the middle of the road. Paralyzed with fear, my father had no choice but to turn around and head back to the ranch, hoping the woman and her daughter might still be there to help him. However, when he arrived, the ranch was pitch black and entirely abandoned. Perplexed and terrified, my father had no choice but to slowly make his way home, his hands trembling the entire drive. The next morning, he decided to return to the ranch, determined to uncover the truth. As he approached, a man on a bicycle passed by, and my father seized the opportunity to ask about the property. The man chuckled and told my father that he wasn't the first taxi driver to have had an encounter there. He explained that the ranch had been abandoned for over 15 years, ever since the woman and her daughter had been struck and killed on the road. My father realized then that his experiences had not been dreams or hallucinations. They were genuine supernatural encounters, and he was not the only one to have had such an unsettling experience. To this day, the memory of those ghostly passengers and the woman without feet haunts him, a testament to the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of our everyday lives.